Hey, do you teach yoga? Have you ever trained to lead yoga classes, to be a yoga therapist? Have you ever owned a yoga studio? Maybe even just wondered what it was like for the women and men up there in front of the room on their mats, leading you through endless Surya Namaskars, down dogs, and pranayamas galore? Well, these are their stories, and mine. I'm Rebecca Sebastian, a 20-year yoga teacher, 10-year yoga therapist, yoga studio owner, and co-founder of a yoga-focused nonprofit. I've done a lot in the yoga world over the last 20 years. Pretty much everything except had a water cooler. You know, a place to share stories, talk about struggles, successes, and find other people who do the same thing that I do. Welcome to Working in Yoga, a podcast and substitute water cooler for yoga folks to connect and build community, to share our unique profession, our challenges, and our journeys with the world.
Hey friends, welcome to Working in Yoga. This is another in the series, What Nobody Told You, and this is a really personal take for me. I've been invested in the yoga therapy career path for nearly 2 decades now, and if this is you too, this one might hit a little close to home. Let's get into it. Here we go. If you're a yoga therapist, or if you're considering becoming one, I need you to stay with me for this entire episode because I'm going to say something that I have wanted to say clearly and publicly for a long time. And I'm saying it not to discourage you and not to diminish what you've built or what you believe in, but because you deserve to have accurate information about the landscape you're working in. The yoga therapy job market that was implied, and in many cases explicitly described when you enrolled in your training program, doesn't exist. Not in the way you were told. Not yet, maybe not for a long time. And the gap between what was promised and what is actually available is not a small gap. It's very significant. And it has real consequences for real people who made real financial decisions based on a picture that wasn't accurate. So let's talk about it clearly and without spin. First, let me say what I'm not doing. I'm not saying yoga therapy isn't real. The practice is legitimate. The outcomes are well documented. The potential for yoga therapy to play a meaningful role in healthcare is very genuine. I believe that. What I'm saying is that the credential was sold ahead of the infrastructure, and that is a specific and consequential kind of misleading. Here's the dynamic. Yoga therapy credentialing organizations need enrollment to survive. Training programs need students to stay open, and the entire ecosystem of yoga therapy education is financially dependent on people believing that becoming a certified yoga therapist leads somewhere professionally viable. So the messaging has consistently emphasized the potential. It's an emerging field, the growing integration of yoga into healthcare settings, the increasing openness of clinicians to referral relationships, all of which is technically true in the most carefully selected best case scenario way. What the messaging has not emphasized, what it has in many cases actively obscured, is that the jobs are not there, that hospitals are not hiring yoga therapists in meaningful numbers in any way, that insurance reimbursement is essentially non-existent for yoga therapy as a standalone service, that the clinical integration being described as emerging has been emerging for 20 years and is still, in most markets, not arrived. Nobody said that clearly because saying it clearly would collapse enrollment. And collapsing enrollment would collapse the organizations. So the gap between the promise and the reality has been managed very carefully with language that is optimistic in its framing and an implied yet that it has been doing a lot of heavy lifting for a very long time. So here's what this looks like for actual yoga therapists. You've completed your training, 800 hours, maybe more. You've passed your test. You have CIAYT next to your name, and you have a deep and genuine expertise in the therapeutic application of yoga that took years and significant money to develop. And now you're discovering that the doors you were told were opening are mostly still closed. Hospitals aren't calling, clinics aren't hiring, The referral relationships with physical therapists and physicians that were described as increasingly common are, in your actual market, hard to find and harder to sustain. So you're piecing it together. Private clients, maybe some studio classes, maybe corporate wellness work, online offerings perhaps, building something viable out of parts that don't quite add up to the career you were sold. And the quiet, devastating part that most yoga therapists are doing this while also carrying the belief that they're the problem. They must be missing something, that other yoga therapists must have figured out something that they haven't. What if they just got one more credential or refined their marketing or found the right niche? The career they were promised would then materialize. It won't. Not because you're doing anything wrong, but because the infrastructure for that career was never built. And you are not failing the field. The field has not yet built what it promised you. So here's what I actually believe. And I want to be clear that this isn't some sort of consolation prize. First, yoga therapy is real. The work is real. The transformation it creates in people's lives is very real. And I believe genuinely, this is not a platitude, that yoga therapy has a meaningful future in healthcare. But that future is not going to be handed to us. It's going to have to be built by us, the people who actually do the work. The path was sold before it was constructed, which means the people who were sold the path are now, whether we signed up for it or not, in the position of having to construct it. That is not fair, and I want to name that clearly. It is not fair that you paid to be trained for a career and were handed a construction project instead. And it is the reality. And once you accept this reality, you can stop organizing your career around a promise and start organizing it around what is actually true. That means building direct relationships with clients rather than waiting for somebody else to construct it. It means educating the clients in your community rather than waiting for the field to do it collectively. It means building income structures that work now in the actual landscape that we're in, rather than the landscape that was described. And it means doing the work of making yoga therapy real in your market, your community, your relationships. And that is built one client, one clinician, and one conversation at a time. The people who are actually making yoga therapy work right now are the people who are doing exactly that. They stopped waiting for the infrastructure and started being the infrastructure. And that is hard. And it is also, I think, the actual calling. You're not lied to about the power of this practice. I want to be very clear about it. What you were is misled about the infrastructure. And those are two very different things. Hold on to the first. It is a powerful practice. And build the second yourself. On Thursday, my friends, I'm continuing this conversation with Dr. Stevie Ingram, and she and I discuss what yoga therapy training and education mean in this current landscape. And next Monday, I will have another What They Never Told You episode talking about yoga organizations specifically. If you're interested in my newsletter, head to the show notes and sign up. It's a great way to keep up with all my new research and the projects that I'm launching this month. So let's go get to work, my friends. And I will catch you around the water cooler next time.